Marcus Johnson woke up to the sound of his mother coughing again. The thin walls of their small apartment in New Detroit did nothing to block out the noise from the busy street below. Cars flew past their window, heading to the rich parts of the city where people had clean air and good food. Marcus lived in the poor section where the buildings were old and falling apart. He got out of bed and walked to his mother's room. Linda Johnson was sitting on the edge of her bed, holding a cloth to her mouth. When she pulled it away, Marcus saw small drops of blood on the white fabric. His heart felt heavy in his chest. "Mom, you're getting worse," Marcus said quietly. He was only 12 years old, but he had to act older because there was no one else to take care of things. Linda looked up at her son and tried to smile. Her face was pale and thin. Dark circles sat under her eyes like purple shadows. "I'm fine, baby. Just a little tired from working late last night." Marcus knew she was lying. His mother worked 3 different jobs just to pay for their tiny apartment and buy food. She cleaned offices in the morning, served food at a restaurant during the day, and fixed broken machines at night. But even with all that work, they barely had enough money to live. The sickness that was killing his mother had a long name that doctors used. Kepler's disease, they called it. It came from the early days when humans first traveled to other planets. Some people got sick from breathing the air on alien worlds. The disease spread slowly through their bodies, making them weak and tired until they couldn't fight it anymore. Marcus had heard the doctors talking when they thought he wasn't listening. They said his mother needed special medicine made from rare crystals found only in the Andromeda Galaxy. The crystals cost more money than most people on Earth would see in their whole lives. The treatment costs 2 million credits. One doctor had told Linda when Marcus was hiding behind the door. "Without it, you have maybe 6 months." That was 3 months ago. Marcus walked to their small kitchen and made breakfast from the little food they had left. Just some bread and fake eggs that came from a machine. Real eggs from actual chickens cost too much money. While he cooked, he thought about his father. Jake Johnson had left when Marcus was only 3 years old. Linda told Marcus that his father loved them both very much, but he had to go away to keep them safe. She never explained what that meant. All Marcus had left of his father was an old guitar and some music recordings from ancient Earth. Marcus had taught himself to sing by listening to those old songs. When his mother was at work and the apartment felt too quiet, he would play the recordings and sing along. His voice wasn't trained by fancy teachers like the rich kids had, but it came from somewhere deep inside him. When he sang, he felt less alone. The news was playing on their old television while Marcus ate his breakfast. A woman with perfect hair and clean clothes was talking about something that made Marcus sit up and pay attention. The annual Galactic Talent Exhibition will take place on Earth next month, the newswoman said. Beings from across the galaxy will compete for the grand prize of 5 million credits and the chance to relocate to any planet in the Federation. Marcus almost choked on his food. 5 million credits. That was more than enough to save his mother and give them a better life. "Contestants must register by the end of this week," the woman continued. "The competition is open to all species and all forms of artistic expression. This year's judges include the famous crystalline entity Zixithara from the Vega system, the telepathic performer Quindal from Rigel, and the mysterious human cultural ambassador Commander Jake Harrison." Marcus's hands started shaking. A talent show. He could sing. Maybe he wasn't as good as the aliens with their strange powers and fancy technology, but he had something real. He had the pain of watching his mother die, and the hope that maybe, somehow, he could save her. After his mother left for her first job, Marcus ran to the public library. The building was old and many of the computers didn't work, but he found one that could connect to the galactic network. His fingers moved quickly as he searched for information about the talent show. Most of the past winners had abilities that seemed impossible to Marcus. Beings who could make light dance in the air, creatures who sang in sounds that humans couldn't even hear, and performers who could make the audience feel emotions just by thinking about them. But then Marcus found something that gave him hope. 10 years ago, a human had placed second in the competition. She was a dancer from the Mars colonies who told simple stories with her body movements. The judges said her performance had authentic emotional resonance that transcended species, barriers. Marcus didn't understand all those big words, but he knew what emotion felt like. Every time he sang one of his father's old songs, emotion poured out of him like water from a broken dam. He looked around the library to make sure no one was watching, then quietly sang a few lines from his favorite song. An old man at a nearby table looked up and smiled. A woman reading a book stopped and listened. Even though Marcus was barely making any sound, something in his voice made people want to hear more. That afternoon, Marcus filled out the registration form for the Galactic Talent Exhibition. He lied about his age, making himself 13 instead of 12. He wrote vocal performance in the talent category and submitted the form before he could change his mind. Walking home through the crowded streets of New Detroit, Marcus looked up at the sky. Somewhere among those stars were worlds with clean air and good medicine. Somewhere up there was a chance to save his mother's life. He didn't know that one of the judges shared his last name for a reason. He didn't know that Commander Jake Harrison wore a mask to hide scars and a face that looked just like Marcus would in 20 years. He only knew that he had to try. That night, while his mother slept fitfully in the next room, Marcus sat with his father's old guitar and practiced singing. His voice rose and fell with the melody, carrying all his hope and fear and love up toward the ceiling of their tiny apartment. Tomorrow he would tell his mother about the competition. Tonight, he just sang for the stars. The day of the talent show arrived faster than Marcus expected. He stood outside the massive dome where the Galactic Talent Exhibition was taking place. Ships from dozens of different worlds filled the sky above the city. Some looked like silver, teardrops, others like floating crystals that caught the sunlight and threw rainbows everywhere. Marcus wore his only good clothes, a clean shirt and pants that his mother had bought him for school last year. They were too small now, but they were the best he had. In his hands, he carried his father's old guitar. The wood was scratched and some of the strings were newer than others, but it still made beautiful music. Linda had wanted to come with him, but she was too sick to leave bed. That morning, she had given him a small metal chain that belonged to his father. "For luck," she had whispered, her voice weak and scratchy. Inside the dome, Marcus felt very small. The ceiling was so high he couldn't see the top. Thousands of seats surrounded a stage that seemed to float in the air without anything holding it up. Beings from across the galaxy filled those seats. Marcus saw creatures with blue skin and 4 arms, others that looked like walking trees, and some that seemed to be made of pure light. "Contestant 247, Marcus Johnson from Earth," a voice called out. Marcus looked around and saw a robot floating toward him. The machine scanned him with a red beam of light. "You are registered for vocal performance. Please wait in Section C until your turn." Section C was full of other performers getting ready for their acts. Marcus had never seen anything like them. A being that looked like living water was practicing making different shapes with its body. Another creature with purple fur was juggling balls of fire that didn't seem to burn anything. In the corner, something that resembled a giant butterfly was creating music by flapping its wings in different patterns. Marcus sat on a bench and watched the performances on a big screen. The first contestant was from a planet called Xerion. It could change the color of its skin to match any emotion it wanted the audience to feel. When it turned red, everyone felt angry. When it turned blue, they felt sad. The judges gave it high scores. Next came a group of beings that looked like floating jellyfish. They sang together in voices so high that Marcus couldn't hear them, but the sound made the air itself glow different colors. The audience loved it. Even Marcus had to admit, it was beautiful. Then the screen showed the judges. Marcus had read about them, but seeing them in person was different. Zixathera looked like a giant crystal that changed colors when it moved. Quindal had pale skin and large eyes that seemed to look right through everything. And Commander Jake Harrison sat between them, wearing a mask that covered most of his face. Only his eyes and mouth were visible. "Why does he wear that mask?" Marcus asked another human contestant sitting nearby. "Got hurt in the Proxima Wars," the other boy replied. "They say his face was burned by alien weapons. He's been the human cultural ambassador for 15 years now. Pretty much the most important human in the galaxy." Marcus nodded and tried not to stare at the screen when Commander Harrison was shown. Something about the man's eyes seemed familiar, but Marcus couldn't figure out what. More contestants performed. A creature from the Andromeda galaxy made tiny stars appear in its hands and threw them into the air where they exploded like fireworks. Twin beings from Rigel performed a dance that made them look like they were flying, even though their feet never left the ground. Each act was more amazing than the last. Marcus began to feel sick to his stomach. How could he compete with beings who had powers he couldn't even understand? All he could do was sing songs that were hundreds of years old. Contestant 247, "You're up next," the floating robot announced. Marcus walked toward the stage on shaking legs. As he got closer, he could hear the audience talking in dozens of different languages. Some were making sounds that weren't even close to human speech. He climbed the steps to the floating platform and stood in the center where a circle of light marked the performance area. The dome fell silent. Thousands of eyes, some human and many definitely not human, stared at him. Marcus looked down at the judges. Commander Harrison was leaning forward in his chair, watching Marcus carefully. Marcus put the strap of his father's guitar over his shoulder and touched the metal chain around his neck. He thought about his mother lying in bed at home, getting weaker every day. He thought about his father, wherever he was among the stars. He thought about all the dreams he had of a better life somewhere far from the poor streets of New Detroit. Then he started to sing. The song was called "Carry Me Home," one of the oldest recordings his father had left behind. It was about being lost and far from the people you love, about hoping that somehow you'll find your way back to them. Marcus didn't have the special powers of the other contestants. He couldn't make lights dance or change colors or create fire. All he had was his voice and the feelings that came from deep inside his heart. As he sang, something strange happened. The audience stopped talking. Even the beings who couldn't understand human language seemed to feel something in Marcus's voice. His words told a story that every living thing could understand. The story of love and loss and hope. Marcus's voice cracked slightly on the highest notes, not because he was nervous, but because thinking about his mother made his throat tight, with sadness. He sang about carrying someone home when they're too tired to walk. He sang about never giving up on the people you love, no matter how far away they seem. When the song ended, the dome was completely quiet. Marcus stood there holding his guitar, not sure what to do next. Had he done something wrong? Had his voice been too weak compared to all the amazing acts before him? Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. Within seconds, the entire dome erupted in the loudest noise Marcus had ever heard. Beings from dozens of worlds were standing up and making whatever sound their species used for approval. Some clapped, others made clicking noises, and still others flashed different colors. Marcus looked down at the judges. Zixathera was glowing bright gold, which Marcus had read meant strong approval. Quindal was nodding its large head and had what looked like tears in its eyes. But Commander Harrison had stood up from his chair and was staring at Marcus like he had seen a ghost. The masked judge turned and walked quickly off the platform, leaving his empty chair behind. Marcus didn't understand what had just happened, but as he walked off the stage, he heard the audience still cheering. For the first time since his mother got sick, he felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. 3 days later, Marcus got the news that changed everything. He had made it to the final round of the competition. Only 5 contestants were left out of the hundreds who had started. Marcus couldn't believe it when the message appeared on their old television screen, but his happiness didn't last long. That same morning, his mother collapsed while trying to make breakfast. Marcus found her on the kitchen floor, breathing fast and shallow like she couldn't get enough air. Her skin looked gray instead of its normal brown color. The ambulance came quickly, but the paramedics shook their heads when they saw Linda. "We need to get her to the hospital right now," one of them said to Marcus. "And you should call someone, in your family." "There's no one else," Marcus replied quietly. "Just me and her." At the hospital, the doctor pulled Marcus into a small room. The man's face was serious and sad. "Your mother is very sick, Marcus. The disease has spread to her lungs and heart. Without the treatment she needs, she has maybe a week left. I'm sorry." Marcus felt like the floor had disappeared under his feet. A week. The final round of the competition was in 5 days. Even if he won, would it be fast enough to save her? How much does the treatment cost? Marcus asked, even though he already knew the answer would break his heart. 2 million credits for the basic treatment. But she's so sick now that she might need the advanced treatment, which costs 5 million credits, the doctor said. I know that's a lot of money. Marcus nodded and went to sit with his mother. Linda was sleeping, with tubes helping her breathe and machines beeping around her bed. She looked so small and fragile. Marcus took her hand and whispered, I'm going to save you, Mom. I promise. The next day, Marcus went back to the competition dome for practice time. The other 4 finalists were there too, and Marcus felt intimidated all over again. There was Veltar, a shape-shifting being from Arcturus who could turn its body into living music. When it performed, Veltar became the actual sound waves, creating music that people could see and touch. Then there was the Centauri Collective, which wasn't one being but dozens of small creatures that worked together like a hive mind. When they performed, they could create harmonies that seemed to come from inside the listener's own head. Their music made people feel like they were floating in space among the stars. The third finalist was Zaradin, from the crystal planet of Epsilon. She could make her crystalline body ring like the most beautiful bell anyone had ever heard. Her music was so pure and perfect that it made people forget all their problems while they listened. The fourth was Orohek, a being made of what looked like golden liquid metal. It could change the shape of its body to become any musical instrument that had ever been created. Orohek could be a piano, a drum, a horn, or 100 instruments all at once. And then there was Marcus, a 12-year-old human boy with a beat-up guitar and a voice that cracked sometimes when he got emotional. While Marcus was tuning his guitar, someone sat down next to him on the practice room bench. He looked up and saw Commander Jake Harrison. Up close, the mask covered even more of the man's face than Marcus had realized. Only his eyes, mouth, and part of his jaw were visible. You performed well in the preliminary round, Commander Harrison said. His voice was deep and familiar in a way that made Marcus feel strange. Thank you, sir, Marcus replied. He didn't know what else to say to such an important person. Commander Harrison was quiet for a moment, then he said, Your song reminded me of someone I knew a long time ago, someone very important to me. What happened to them? Marcus asked. I had to leave them behind to keep them safe, the commander said softly. It was the hardest thing I ever did. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Those were almost the exact words his mother had used to explain why his father had left. But that was probably just a coincidence. Lots of people had to leave their families, for different reasons. Commander Harrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device about the size of Marcus's thumb. This is a vocal enhancer, he said. It can make your voice louder and clearer. It might help you compete against the others. Marcus looked at the device but didn't take it. My mom always told me that real strength comes from inside a person, not from machines or gadgets. Commander Harrison went very still. She said that? Yes, sir. She says it all the time when things get hard. The commander's hands started shaking slightly. He put the vocal enhancer back in his jacket. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is, Marcus said. She's in the hospital now. That's why I have to win this competition. The prize money is the only way I can save her life. Commander Harrison stood up quickly, like Marcus had hit him. What's wrong with her? Kepler's disease. The doctors say she got it from breathing bad air on one of the colony planets when she was younger, before I was born. The commander's face went pale, at least the parts Marcus could see. Kepler's disease, he repeated quietly. Do you know about it, sir? I know more about it than I wish I did, Commander Harrison replied. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but then an announcement came over the speakers. All finalists, report to the main stage for final instructions. Commander Harrison started to walk away, then stopped and turned back. Marcus, what's your mother's name? Linda Johnson, sir. The commander closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they looked wet like he might cry. And your father? Jake Johnson. But he left when I was little. My mom says he had to go away to keep us safe. Commander Harrison stood there for a long time without moving. Other people walked past them, but he didn't seem to notice. Finally, he said, "Good luck in the final round, Marcus. I hope you get everything you're fighting for." Then he walked away, leaving Marcus alone, with his guitar and more questions than answers. That night, Marcus sat in the hospital room with his mother. Linda was awake but very weak. The machines around her bed beeped faster now, and she had to rest between every few words she spoke. "How was practice today?" she asked. "Good, Mom. I think I have a real chance of winning." Linda smiled and squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you no matter what happens, baby. You've grown up to be such a good man, just like your father." "Tell me about him again," Marcus said. "He had the most beautiful voice," Linda whispered. "When he sang, it was like he was talking directly to your heart. And his eyes. He had kind eyes that saw the good in everyone." Marcus nodded, thinking about Commander Harrison's eyes and how familiar they had seemed. "He loved us both so much," Linda continued. "Leaving us was the hardest thing he ever did, but he thought it was the only way to keep us safe from the dangerous life he lived." As his mother fell asleep, Marcus wondered about his father and where he might be now. "Somewhere among the stars," Linda always said. Marcus looked out the hospital window at the night sky and whispered, "If you're out there, Dad, I could really use your help right now." He didn't know that in another part of the city, Commander Jake Harrison was sitting in his quarters, holding an old picture of a woman named Linda and a baby named Marcus, wondering if it was finally time to come home. The final round took place on the Federation flagship, a massive ship that floated high above Earth's atmosphere. Marcus had never been in space before. When the transport shuttle carried him up through the clouds and into the darkness beyond, he pressed his face to the window and watched his home planet grow smaller below him. The competition arena inside the ship was even bigger than the dome on Earth. Millions of beings from across the galaxy were watching, either in person or through broadcasts that reached every inhabited world. Marcus felt dizzy thinking about how many eyes would be on him when he performed. The other finalists were getting ready backstage. Veltar was practicing changing from solid form into pure sound waves. The Centauri collective was humming together, in perfect harmony, their dozens of small bodies glowing softly. Zaradin was making her crystal body ring with different musical notes, and Orohek was shifting from the shape of a violin to a drum to a flute. Marcus sat alone with his father's guitar, trying not to think about his mother back in the hospital. Before he left Earth, the doctors had told him that Linda was getting worse. Her heart was working too hard and her lungs were filling with fluid. She might not have the full week they had originally thought. "If I don't win today, she's going to die," Marcus whispered to himself. A voice behind him said, "You don't have to carry this alone." Marcus turned around and saw Commander Harrison walking toward him. The masked judge wasn't supposed to be backstage with the contestants, but no one seemed to want to stop him. "Sir, you shouldn't be here," Marcus said. "There are a lot of things I shouldn't have done," Commander Harrison replied. He sat down next to Marcus on the bench. "But there are also things I should have done a long time ago." The commander was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Marcus, I need to tell you something important. Something I should have told you 3 days ago." Before Marcus could ask what he meant, an announcement echoed through the backstage area. "All finalists to the stage. The final round begins in 5 minutes." Commander Harrison stood up. "After your performance, find me. We need to talk." Marcus nodded, confused but focused on what he had to do. He walked toward the stage, his guitar, strap over his shoulder and his father's metal chain around his neck. The arena was so bright that Marcus couldn't see the audience at first. Slowly, his eyes adjusted and he realized he was looking at the largest crowd any human had ever performed for. Beings from hundreds of different worlds filled the seats. Some had blue skin, others were covered in fur or scales, and many looked like nothing Marcus had ever imagined. Veltar performed first. The shape-shifting being turned itself into a symphony of living sound. Music flowed through the air like colored ribbons, and the audience could actually touch the melodies as they danced around the arena. When Veltar finished, the applause sounded like thunder. The Centauri Collective went next. Their hive mind created harmonies that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The music seemed to come from inside each listener's head, personal and intimate yet shared by everyone at the same time. Many beings in the audience started crying from the beauty of it. Zaradin's crystal body rang like the most perfect bell in the universe. Her notes were so pure and clear that they seemed to heal old wounds in the hearts of those who heard them. The audience sat in complete silence when she finished, too moved to make any sound. Orohek became an entire orchestra, shifting from instrument to instrument so fast that it looked like golden lightning dancing across the stage. The music was complex and technical, showing off skills that no single being should have been able to possess. Then it was Marcus's turn. He walked to the center of the stage and looked out at the millions of faces watching him. In the judges' section, he could see Commander Harrison leaning forward in his chair. Something about the man's posture looked familiar, like Marcus had seen him sit that way before. Marcus adjusted his guitar and spoke into the microphone. "I want to dedicate this song to my mother, Linda Johnson, who was fighting for her life back on Earth, and to my father, Jake Johnson, who I never got to know but who I hope is somewhere out there among the stars." In the judges' section, Commander Harrison went completely still. Marcus began to play a song he had written himself during the long nights at his mother's hospital bedside. He called it Love Across the Stars. It was about how love could travel any distance and survive any amount of time. It was about hoping that the people you care about are safe, even when you can't be with them. As Marcus sang, something incredible began to happen across the galaxy. On thousands of worlds, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. Old soldiers who had fought in terrible wars found tears running down their faces. Ancient creatures who had lived for centuries felt emotions they thought they had forgotten. Parents held their children closer, and lovers reached for each other's hands. Marcus sang about a mother's love that never gave up, even when her body was failing. He sang about a father's sacrifice, leaving his family to keep them safe from danger. He sang about a son's hope that somehow, someday, all the broken pieces would come back together. His voice wasn't perfect. It cracked on some of the high notes, and sometimes he had to stop to catch his breath. But every imperfection made the song more real, more human, more true. As Marcus reached the final chorus, he saw Commander Harrison stand up from his chair. The masked judge's hands were shaking and he was reaching up toward his face. Marcus sang the last lines of his song. "Love can cross any distance. Love can survive any storm. No matter how far we travel, love will always bring us home." The arena fell completely silent. Marcus stood there holding his guitar, not sure what would happen next. Then Commander Harrison did something that shocked everyone in the arena. He reached up and pulled off his mask, revealing a face that was scarred but unmistakably familiar. It was an older version of Marcus's own face, with the same eyes and the same mouth. "My son," Commander Harrison said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "I'm so sorry I stayed away so long." Marcus dropped his guitar. It hit the stage with a loud crash that echoed through the arena. "Dad?" Marcus whispered. The man who had been calling himself Jake Harrison nodded. Tears were running down his scarred cheeks. "Yes, Marcus, I'm your father. I'm Jake Johnson, and I never stopped loving you and your mother." The arena erupted in chaos. Beings from across the galaxy were talking and shouting in hundreds of different languages. Camera drones flew around the stage, broadcasting the reunion to billions of viewers. But Marcus only had eyes for his father. The man who had been missing from his life for 9 years was standing right there, reaching out to him. Marcus ran across the stage and threw his arms around his father. Jake Johnson held his son tight, both of them crying too hard to speak. "I have so much to explain," Jake whispered in Marcus's ear. "But first, we need to save your mother." Marcus pulled back and looked at his father's scarred but kind face. "Can we really save her?" "Yes," Jake said firmly. "Between the prize money and what I've saved over the years, we have enough for the advanced treatment. She's going to be okay, son. We're all going to be okay. As father and son held each other on the stage of the galactic arena, the audience gradually fell quiet again. Then slowly, they began to applaud. Not just for Marcus's performance, but for the power of love that could survive any distance and overcome any obstacle. The other judges didn't even need to vote. Marcus had won something much more valuable than a competition. He had found his father and gained the power to save his mother's life. But more than that, his song had reminded every being in the galaxy that some things, love, hope, family, were universal languages that everyone could understand. The judges didn't need to discuss their decision. Marcus Johnson had won the Galactic Talent Exhibition by unanimous vote. But as confetti fell from the ceiling and the crowd cheered, Marcus only cared about one thing: getting back to Earth to save his mother. Jake Johnson, no longer hiding behind the name Harrison, worked quickly to arrange everything. Within hours, a Federation medical ship was racing toward Earth with the most advanced treatment equipment in the galaxy. Jake had been saving money for 15 years, and combined with Marcus's prize winnings, they had enough to give Linda the best care possible. "Why did you stay away so long?" Marcus asked his father as their transport ship flew back to Earth. They sat together in the passenger cabin, finally able to talk without masks or secrets between them. Jake looked out the window at the stars. His scarred face showed years of pain and regret. "After you were born, I was working for Federation Intelligence. We discovered that a criminal organization was planning to kidnap the families of important Federation officers. Your mother and you were on their target list because of my work." Marcus listened quietly as his father continued. "I had two choices. I could quit my job and hide with you both, but then we would have spent our whole lives running and looking over our shoulders. Or I could fake my own death, let everyone think Jake Johnson was gone, and take a new identity to hunt down the criminals who wanted to hurt you." "So you became Jake Harrison," Marcus said. "Yes. It took me 5 years to destroy that criminal network completely. But by then, you and your mother had built a life without me. I thought it would be cruel to come back and disrupt that. So I stayed away, but I watched over you both from a distance." Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick folder. "I've been secretly sending money to help with your mother's medical bills. It wasn't enough for the full treatment, but it helped keep her alive longer." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. "All these years I thought you didn't want us." "Not wanting you was never the problem," Jake said, putting his arm around his son. "Loving you too much to risk your safety was the problem. I made the wrong choice. I should have found a way to stay." When they reached Earth, Linda Johnson was barely conscious. The doctors had moved her to the intensive care unit, where machines were doing most of the work of keeping her alive. She was so weak that she couldn't open her eyes when Marcus and Jake walked into her room. "Mom, I won," Marcus whispered, taking her hand. "I won the competition and I brought someone to see you." Linda's eyes fluttered open. When she saw Jake standing beside Marcus, she started crying. "Jake?" she whispered. "Is it really you?" "I'm here, Linda," Jake said, kneeling beside her bed. "I'm so sorry I stayed away. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just being a coward." "You kept us safe," Linda said weakly. "Marcus grew up to be such a good man. He has your voice and your heart." The medical team arrived with the advanced treatment equipment. The procedure took 6 hours, during which Marcus and Jake sat together in the waiting room. Jake told Marcus stories about his childhood, about the day Marcus was born, and about all the birthdays and school concerts he had watched from a distance, proud but unable to be part of his son's life. "I heard every song you sang," Jake said. "Sometimes I would park outside your apartment building just to listen to you practice. Your voice reminded me of everything good I had given up." When the doctors finally came out, they were smiling. "The treatment worked," the lead doctor announced. "The disease is completely gone from her system. She'll need time to recover her strength, but Linda Johnson is going to make a full recovery." Marcus hugged his father so hard that Jake laughed for the first time in years. But the story of Marcus's victory had spread far beyond just saving his mother. News broadcasts across the galaxy were calling it the most moving performance in the History of the Talent Exhibition. Marcus's song had been downloaded billions of times. Beings from hundreds of worlds were learning to sing Love Across the Stars in their own languages. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the stage of the newly built Intergalactic Cultural Center on Earth. His mother, now healthy and strong, sat in the front row next to his father. Linda's skin had color again, and she was smiling the way she used to when Marcus was little. The Cultural Center was built with money from across the galaxy. After Marcus's performance, thousands of worlds had donated funds to create a place where beings from different species could share their art and music. Earth, once the poorest planet in the Federation, had become the center of galactic culture. Marcus had been named the youngest cultural ambassador in Federation history. His job was to travel with his parents to different worlds, teaching others about human music and learning about their art in return. Today we celebrate the power of music to bring all beings together, Marcus said into the microphone. The audience included representatives from every world in the Federation. My song was about love crossing any distance. But I've learned that music can cross even greater distances than love. Music can cross the space between different species, different worlds, and different ways of thinking. Marcus picked up his father's old guitar. The scratched instrument looked very small on the huge stage, but Marcus had refused all offers to replace it with something newer and fancier. This guitar belonged to my father, who taught me that real strength comes from inside a person. It belongs to my mother, who showed me that love never gives up. And now it belongs to all of us because music belongs to everyone. Marcus began to play Love Across the Stars, but this time he wasn't singing alone. As he reached the first chorus, other voices joined in. Zixthera, the crystal judge, created harmonies that sounded like wind chimes. Quindal added telepathic melodies that every being could hear in their own mind. Then something amazing happened. Beings throughout the audience began to sing along, each in their own language and their own way. The song became a tapestry of sounds that had never been heard before. Human voices mixed with alien harmonies, creating music that belonged to no single world, but to the entire galaxy. As the song reached its end, Marcus looked out at the audience and saw beings from dozens of worlds holding hands or touching in whatever way their species showed affection. His music had reminded them all that despite their differences, they shared the same basic feelings of love, hope, and the desire to belong somewhere. Jake Johnson stood up and began to applaud. Soon the entire auditorium was on their feet, creating a sound of approval that could be heard all the way to the spaceport. After the show, Marcus walked with his parents through the streets of New Detroit. The slums where he had grown up were being transformed into art districts where humans and aliens worked together to create new forms of beauty. Children who had once gone hungry were now learning to paint and sing and dance. "Do you ever regret entering that talent show?" Linda asked her son. Marcus looked up at the night sky, where ships from across the galaxy were landing and taking off, bringing visitors who wanted to experience human culture. "No," Marcus said. "The best things happen when you're brave enough to hope for something better." Jake put his arm around both Linda and Marcus. "I spent 15 years thinking I had to choose between love and duty. You taught me that the bravest thing is to choose both." As they walked home together under the stars, Marcus began to hum quietly. The melody drifted up into the night air, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of an entire galaxy that had learned to sing in harmony. Somewhere among those stars, on thousands of different worlds, other beings were humming the same tune. Marcus Johnson's voice had crossed every distance and touched every heart, proving that some things truly are universal. The boy from the slums of New Detroit had become the voice of an entire galaxy, and in doing so, had brought his family home.